Nice job, nice job, nice job.
Greetings and salutations. My name is Sasha Moreau, one of the co-founders of FairVU. This is our podcast where we like to talk to musicians about their music and the mayhem that they have experienced. My guest today is Mr. Leland. He is from the Dumpster Fire Heroes. They're based out of Astoria, Oregon. Leland, say hello.
Hello. I am Leland Fallon, and my band is called the Dumpster Fire Heroes. It is actually an extension of a live project I started many years ago, and just recently had the opportunity to put some songs together with these fantastic local musicians and put a show together. So we played last night, and Sasha was our guest there, and it was fantastic.
Such a cool time. And Astoria is an amazing town to come out and see a live show, because there is not a whole bunch going on. It's not a metropolis city. It's a little town on the northern point of Oregon. And so when there is something going on, everybody comes out.
We have a local audience. A lot of people here work in hospitality, bars, food and restaurant, that kind of thing, to keep the tourist community alive. Astoria is famous because they filmed The Goonies here and Kindergarten Cop and
Short Circuit.
It's a destination town. A lot of people come here, but then at night they're looking for something to do. So we've had United Defiance here. 2 New Years ago, we bought out the ever amazing Authority Zero. That was your second time, I think, out here playing with them.
Yeah, it was. Phenomenal show, too. That was so much fun.
Some other great, some other great bands.
The Atomic Gamma Rays? I think did an opening set. Either way, it was an amazing show, and part of the reason was because it was all ages and it was a community thing for New Year's, and so there was not a whole bunch of sloppy drunks around, and kids were there, and
it was fantastic.
It was this amazing community production of everyone coming together and doing music and dancing, and it was just the best.
Retroactive Gamma
That's
Rays.
Right, not Atomic Gamma Rays. This is all good because we're getting into conversation, and we don't get to see each other all that often, so this is super cool. Before we get officially started, is this not the all-time coolest office you have ever seen? It's
kind of the place where I hang my stuff, I guess. I don't know.
This is sick, man. This has all sorts of everything, music memorabilia and stuff on the walls and posters, and that's just there's guitars and there's amps and the radio record player set up. Easily the coolest office I've ever been in.
It's a place where my wife said I could hang up all my souvenirs. So that's
perfect.
Yeah.
Give me your origin story as a musician. How did you come to music? What's your pedigree, your background, influences? Who made you into the musician that you are right now?
Oh my gosh, it's a great question. So I grew up in a somewhat religious household, and so there was we didn't have a whole lot of exposure to rock and roll outside of probably, whatever church band was playing and, Amy Grant. We were stationed overseas. And so we would come back in the summertime to Huntington Beach, California. And at the time it was...
Where were you overseas?
I was in Okinawa, Japan.
Oh, man.
And so
my
freshman, sophomore year of high school, a couple things happened. I met two guys who had a band in Okinawa that were in the United States Air Force, who had owned a record label in Benicia, California called Springbox Records. And so they had records. This was Justin Snyder and Bill. I'm spacing on Bill's last name. Anyway, they had given me records, and they said, hey, here's our band in California, Joy Bus. And here's this band, from... all of these Gilman Street bands that would turn out to be legendary.
Absolutely.
And they said, hey, this is Operation Ivy. These are these bands. And I was like,
That's
wow.
cool.
So I listened to these, and I was really excited. So we'd come home from the summer, and I wind up going to the record store, and my cousin at the time, her name was Malia, rest in peace. She had an affinity to sort of standing up to the kind of right-wing identity politics that was there even back then. And so she had her favorite stores. And one of her favorite stores was a record store called The Vinyl Solution. This was a place that she and her boyfriend would take me at the time. And so we would go and they would say, okay, you need this record, you need this record, you need this record.
Was this in Berkeley or this was in what?
This was actually in Huntington
Oh,
Beach,
Huntington Beach.
California.
Okay, so Southern California.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
So my stumbling upon punk rock was a combination of skating everywhere when I was a kid, listening to other kids' comp tapes and things they'd had. And then one year, my mom had bought us these yellow Sony Sport Walkman things.
I had one.
So that we could listen to whatever preaching tape that the pastor had released that Sunday. So we were going on this hideous cross-country road trip from Arizona to Washington, D.C. And my dad stopped for gas at this place, and my brother and I looked up and we saw a warehouse entertainment store that had tapes for sale.
I remember
and so
the
we're
warehouse.
like, Dad, we're going to the bathroom. And he's like, okay, don't be too long. And we hauled ass across the street, and I went to the punk rock section of the warehouse entertainment store, and I found 2 tapes. I found the Descendants tape for Liveage, and then I found a comp for the band Dag Nasty, Discord Records. And it was just a combination of songs that I think Sean had done.
That's amazing.
At the time. So I had to go on this hideous family road trip, and I played those 2 tapes endlessly over and over and over until I knew.
But your parents thought you were listening to the preaching tapes.
And my mom kept looking back at us over the seat in this enormous Ford Econoline van going, isn't this great? Isn't it great? And we're like, yeah.
You said that, the Gilman bands, Gilman Street, 924 Gilman, that's like kind of the most famous punk rock club on the West Coast. It's like the West Coast version of CBGB.
Berkeley, California, and amazing place, and a lot of bands got their start there.
Second thing real quick, a comp tape and a comp CD. If you're young, you have no idea what this is, possibly. It used to be a thing that record labels would put out these CDs and tapes for super, super cheap. We're talking like $3, $5, something like that.
In some cases, I think.
For like 25 or 27 or 30 songs.
Sometimes they just throw them in for free if you were spending.
Or if you go to a show, they'd just be like handing them out, being like, hey, check this out. I still have all of my comp CDs from when I was growing up, and I actually just gave them to my daughter, and she's listening to them now as well. So that's all good. Okay, so you're cross country on your road trip, and you're listening to punk rock. How did you get to actually becoming a musician and playing?
So we got back. We had listened to all these records and got back to Japan, and had met some people who were interested in sort of putting something together. Yeah, and there was kind of a fun local scene there. A bunch of military kids. It was very multicultural, because we went to a school that had, every race, every creed, every country, was sort of represented. And we all took turns in people's band. We'd rent studio space, and we bought mostly what would become enormously expensive over time, but were not at the time. But we called them like kind of Japanese knockoffs. They were not Japanese knockoffs. Japanese companies would make specific versions of Jackson, Ibanez, all these other guitars that sounded phenomenal, but they cost less than if you ordered them from the U.S. or whatever, had them sent to you. I had a Les Paul that was a I think Epiphone. Okay. And I saved all my money from that from my job, and so I bought an Epiphone Les Paul, and I was ecstatic, and it was so light. And to this day, I wish I still had it, because the real Les Paul is so heavy. The one I have is from 1977, and it probably weighs like about 19 pounds.
Mine, I've got a Gibson Les Paul from 1978.
Oh no!
Which weighs 1,500 pounds.
Yeah. So I had that guitar, and I had a couple different bands that I played with in Japan. And then when I got to college a million years ago, I realized that I was going to need a better guitar. I'd kind of bent some of the frets when I was jumping around and crashed into my bass player and the drum set. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to need a nicer guitar. And I'd heard Gibson. I was unprepared for how much Gibsons cost, and I didn't have very much money in my bank. I'd sort of saved a whole bunch of money from working my summer job, so I had about $500. And I was walking downtown, and I went into this pawn shop, and I saw this like cherry red, Gibson Les Paul. It was a studio, but it didn't say studio on it. Okay. And it was the 1955 reissue that came out in 1977, and it was $475. So it was everything that I had in my bank except for $25. That's what I had left to eat with. Okay. And so I bought this guitar, and I took it home, and I plugged it into my crappy amp, and I put on, I think, Fat Music for Fat People, and I put on what was the Epitaph variant of that? I can't remember. It was,
Punkorama.
Punkorama. Yeah. And so I would put on those 2 records, and I would play along with those 2 records, along with, Sabbath and anything else I could find to sort of jam to that was like, I think I might be able to figure out those chords. Dude. That's how I taught myself to play. That's how I started playing in bands and having a good time. Yeah.
That's amazing. Do you write your own original material as well? Or are you just playing covers still? What's your...
I do. Yeah, we have a number of original songs that we've written that are fantastic, and then there's a couple of songs that we do that are kind of covers that are just fun to play.
They opened their set last night with a cover song from Op Ivy that was fantastic.
We had been asked to play this kind of local underground bookstore, and then we showed up, and the owner there had an Operation Ivy T-shirt on, and I had we'd never met him before. I had no idea, and so sometimes the roots of music sort of cosmically interconnect. I think all of us as we go along. Yeah.
So so as a musician, do you have a particular song or piece of work or recording or something that you are the most proud of, that you like? And I know, talking with some artists, a lot of artists don't like their own stuff, and they get into this headspace of they hear what they were not able to accomplish or what they weren't able to produce. That's a hard, like, being an artist is not easy. So weighted question: do you have something that stands out to you that you like?
I wrote a song like quite a while ago.
Okay.
That was called New Car, and it starts out with me kind of doing my version of a solo, which was my idea of a solo, when I was like 23 or something, and it's not very good, but it was just what I could figure out at the time. And so I'm like, I'm going to play this, even though it's all over the fretboard, because that's where I know the notes are. That's kind of how I taught myself to play it. And I still love that song to this day. And I've got just heavy down picking in there. I've got down picking and up picking. I've got like just a bounce along the frets. So it's almost like this imitation kind of ska thing, but I have to keep it that way because it's fast. And so I'm trying to like go along with what Joe Bear's playing, on the solo side of the song, but it's a lot of fun. So I love that.
So that's super cool that you said that was the one that you're proud of, because they also played that last night. So I got to experience that, and the solo that you said was not very good. First off, that's a subjective term. I thought it was great, and it was really cool actually, because as you were playing it, it was not perfectly on the downbeat. It was on the sort of offbeat. And you mentioned ska, and so as I heard it at first, because it's just you start solo doing that before the band comes in, but there is sort of the drums kind of keeping time on like a hi-hat or something, and as you started, I was like, oh, that's odd. What's a? And I'm trying to get the beat like going with it, and it didn't quite work in my head until the solo came back again with the full band, who then were doing the upbeats, and then it like lined up, and it was badass. So good on you. That's super cool.
I learned that watching. I kind of learned that style. You're gonna laugh at me, but I learned that watching a guy named Marco DeSantis, legendary guitar player, in my mind, a legendary guitar player, and and a friend, and he was in Bad Astronaut. When I learned that, when I watched him do that, he was in the Ataris, and we were working with them in a separate area of the country, coming from Vegas, and they came and played for me in the college town I was in Flagstaff, Arizona. I'd heard him do that on a handful of songs. I was like, I want to learn how to do that, so I kind of watched him. Anyway,
let me ask you, what do you like about being a musician?
Oh man. I love writing stuff. I love writing kind of lyrics, but in my head, being able to hear it to a tune that I'm just kind of writing as I go along. And comically, what's so funny is you can have this idea for a song, or this idea for the lyrics come from you. Those come from the heart. And so, but you're putting these lyrics together with some music, and what often amazes me is how startlingly similar it is to whatever you just were listening to the day before on the radio, because we're human beings, and so those things in our subconscious collect there. And I don't know how many times I've written something new, and I play it for Maggie, and she's like, I think that sounds like something that Kesha did, or something like I mean, just some different melody or something that was there. And I also love, I gotta say this, I love the collaboration process between you and everybody else. I love that you can have this dynamic idea, and you're like, this is going to kick so much ass. And then you get in the room with 3 or 4 other dudes, and they're like, dude, that is bullshit. Wait a minute. I like this lyric and I like this lyric, but what if we changed it here, here, and here? And what if instead of this, I did this? And so the collaboration process with people putting new music together, and at first you're like, that song was perfect and I hate you. And then like 20 minutes later, you're like, dude, that actually sounds really good.
Let me ask you, what do you not like about being a musician? What do you find challenging?
Oh my goodness. I think, in the musician, for me, thing is weird because my last band was a long time ago.
And that's okay. Can I pause you? I'm going to interrupt myself about this. Leland is in a super interesting position right now because he has been a musician for a long time, but he hasn't been in a band for 25 years?
26 years.
26 years.
This is the first time I've had a real band together in that long, and mostly because of helping other bands.
And so this is the power of music, and this is what FairVU is all about in terms of getting everybody on the same page and elevating everyone. What brought you back? I don't usually get to talk to musicians where they've stopped and then they've come back.
I mean, I was a promoter first. I was writing for a college, newspaper, met a local promoter who said that he wanted to work with me and started sending me shows. And so I was working with bands, pretty much nonstop for about 16 or 17 years.
Yeah.
And,
so you've been in the industry the whole way through.
Oh, yeah. I did label work with Island Def Jam, and I did oh my gosh, hip hop shows, tons and tons and tons of punk rock shows, in the wake of the Vans Warped Tour and other things, punk bands and things like that were up and coming, that would become these just legendary acts over the years, but you don't realize that when you're first there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I worked with like Deftones on shows for like Adrenaline and Around the Fur. I worked for, so many bands coming up and going and doing small club shows, and then kind of worked my way up from there. And then took a break for a long time, and then got back into it, helping out a lot of festivals in Canada, like Music for Cancer, and then Redbridge Fest for a little while, Festival Lac and Rock La Cause for a year. We booked Descendants to do that, but that was during COVID, so that kind of backed out. Anyway, so I had done a lot of work professionally and still do actually for bands, and I help kind of book people, manage people, try to steer them in the right direction. So one day in Astoria, we had some local guys that said, "Hey, do you want to jump up here and grab your guitar and do a sound check?" And I was like, "Okay, screw it, I'm gonna give it a shot." So I got up there and I played some of these songs, and then the guys in this other great local band here in Astoria called Get Down Moses heard the songs, and then they kind of approached me and said, "Hey, what would you think of playing those with a band?" And I said, "I think I would really like that. It's been a very long time." So I went from being this guy who's been an industry guy for years and years and years to putting, getting the band back together. And now we have the weekly practices, the weekly, the weekly arguments, the who's going to transport the gear, who's writing what, who's playing what. And it's been just fantastic. So.
And so you see what he did? Consummate professional here. You just set yourself up. So what do you not like about being a musician? What do you find challenging now that we have established sort of what's up?
I think the hard thing is watching so many people struggle. In this day and age, we have our unholy streaming overlords who own anything and everything. And people starting in a band are having to work 3 and 4 and sometimes 5 jobs to get basic gig material together. They're hoping and praying that somebody somewhere famous will stream their song or play their song on Instagram so that it will boost up their Spotify streams, and they can somehow finally try to make ends meet. And I think that's so unfortunate. To me, it just blows my mind that creative people and creative things could go as unrewarded as they go in the year 2025. We can't even figure out how to pay musicians. Like, what the hell's wrong with us?
And music,
or teachers, or anything else. For that matter.
No, for sure.
Musicians specifically,
for sure.
But they deserve more than they get.
When the pandemic closed everything down, it was the artists that saved everyone.
Kept us all going.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh my God, I was in this just depressive funk constantly, and there were bands like Authority Zero that played on a live stream, and I didn't have any chance to be there or see them, but watching it on my television set was just magical. The Dropkick Murphys doing their old friends too. They just played Music for Cancer this last year. Watching Ken and the guys light up that stage in Boston for St. Patty's Day from my couch where we were probably still masked up inside, for God's sake. Everybody was scared. So watching them, and then another amazing group of guys from Brighton in the UK, the Barstool Preachers, who have become some of my favorite people. They also did live stream stuff from Blackpool and from other areas. And we're just like, you know what? We're not allowed to hang out. We're not allowed to do anything. But we're going to put this concert for you on your couch. And I feel like in that, a lot of ways that saved saved me from going to very, very dark places during that time.
I've got 2 more quick questions for you. Thank you so much for your time, dude.
Yeah.
It is so cool to actually talk to you. Share with me one experience that you had that was formative for you about music, that you had something happen, you saw something, you heard something, you had some experience where you thought to yourself, like, dude, music, there's something special here, and this is it, and I want more of this.
Oh my goodness. Wow. What a great question. So many experiences over the years. When you work for a midline production house, you have those shows you do and those tours that are for X percentage of time where you're going to do this state or that state or 3 states, and then you come back and pick up the next contract. And so we had a chance to work with, everybody from James Brown to Willie Nelson to, BB King, like you name it.
Damn, that's cool.
Over the years,
Damn, that's cool.
Over the years, the one that immediately jumps to mind is the band Flogging Molly. I'm wearing their T-shirt right now. So I had reached out to them because they do a lot of nice things for people, for charities. And I reached out to their management team and then reached out to Bridget and David, who I only knew through email, and said, hey, I'm representing this organization that's raising money for cancer. And do you think you guys might contribute like a song to us or something like that? And they were on board with it. And they were just so, great. So they helped us over the years. And then one night, it's punk rock bowling. I'm coming back through the central bar with all the poker machines in the Nugget.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I kind of want a nightcap, but it's 4 a.m. Maybe I should just go sleep because it's, it's that kind of environment. It's that crazy thing. And so I look in the bar in front of me is 5 deep in every direction. And then all of a sudden, like these 4 guys just move out of my way. And it was like, this path to the bar. I had a straight walk to the bartender. So I went right up to the bartender, ordered the nightcap. And I look to my left and I see David King and Bridget Regan just sitting there hanging out. And he's looking at me and she's looking at me. And they're like,
are you?
And I said, you guys are amazing. I love you guys. And you've helped my charities so much. And they're like, I was wearing a shirt for the 100-year anniversary of the Easter Rebellion. My family's, from Ireland.
Okay.
And Dave saw that and flipped out. It was like, oh my God, look at this shirt. Anyway, those lovely people they told me road stories and just amazingness for like 2 hours. They did not let me buy a drink until like 6 a.m. And I think even then it was definitely time for us all to go.
Yeah.
But they said, you have to come out to the next show and you have to bring your wife because we want to meet her too. So they invited Maggie out in Oakland. But the point of all this was they said, we were trying to raise money for cancer research with Music for Cancer. And they said, we have a boat that we do every year. It's the Flogging Molly Cruise, a Salty Dog Cruise.
The Salty Dog Cruise. Yeah,
we want you on that boat. And you can do a T-shirt with all the bands and you can, raise money, raise awareness for your cause.
Dude.
They paid for us to be on the boat. They were so kind. And the greatest thing about this was Dave, he kept looking over at Bridget saying, can we do this? Is this okay? Can we do this? And she kept looking back at him and going, it's your boat, darling. You can do whatever you want to with your boat. So they had us on and it was amazing. And we were able to do so many good things for Music for Cancer and also approach other bands to play our festival over the years. So many people on the Flogging Molly Cruise. We had, Bouncing Souls that were like, yes, we would love to come out and play. Voodoo Glow Skulls, Pennywise. I've known those guys for years, but reconnecting with them on the boat and other places has just been, phenomenal. So sometimes you have those little moments of luck or kismet or whatever the hell you want to call it. Just like, wait a minute, something just happened here and I'm not done with this. And I've had so many of those in a long career of working in music and playing music that I'm like, man, why did that happen? But the fact that it happened and then it just continues to build momentum is amazing. And I'm sorry, that was a very long answer to that question.
Dude, I think that is probably one of the coolest answers I have ever heard to that question ever.
But I also told that story because I want to tell you, Dave is going through a real hard time right now with health. And I don't know the specifics and I'm not going to say anything there, but I know he had to cancel all their gigs for 2025. So I want to give a shout out to that guy and say, I love you, dude. And I'm glad you're fighting.
Yeah, dude.
Keep fighting. Kicking this thing's ass.
Best of luck, man. So last little bit here. One of the things that at FairVU we talk about is the soundtrack of our lives, and this is something that happens. It exists not just for musicians, but for anyone. If you listen to music, I guarantee you there is a soundtrack to your life. There is some song, some series of songs that you hear, and immediately you are back in some memory, some part of your life that was emotionally significant. So I'm not going to ask you to rank them. I'm not going to ask you to give me an exhaustive list, because we will absolutely be here for longer than I have battery life.
That's true.
But I was just curious if off the top of your head you could give me 2, 3, maybe 4 artists who comprise the soundtrack of your life and who are significant.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And then what we do here is we're going to be tagging them in this, so that they can get in front of that. Just as a quick shout out, because you know what, we are stronger together, and we're making all the connections and doing what we can to lift each other up.
I had a friend in high school that also played in a band. His name is Sheldon Morley. And we liked punk bands and liked all these other things. He was in a different band than me. But he was the first person, I think, that ever made me a mixtape. And it wasn't like I want to date you mixtape. It was like a, hey, I want you to see all the cool shit at my house. And then maybe you could do, return the favor, something. So he said, hey, I made this and it's for you. So I took this home and I popped this tape in, and oh my God, the music on here was just insane. I mean, the theme was clearly like just, kind of dissonant, rock. So the tape started out and it was the Pink Floyd song Bike.
Okay.
Which is not your traditional, Pink Floyd The Wall song. I mean, I think it's Sid Barrett, and it's very different, but it's very cool. And it's just like almost this sing along. And then he had MDC on there. He had
that's quite a stretch in terms of genre.
The Clash was on there. He had the Damned on there, which was the funniest thing about the Damned thing that was on there was it was from their goth record that they did, which is Phantasmagoria. Which is one of my favorite goth records of all time, even though it was done by a punk band, and it is fantastic. In terms of pieces of music from there or specific artists, I remember so there was a Grateful Dead song on there, and I did not grow up a Grateful Dead fan, but many years later, Bob Weir and I would get to become friends and very close. We still talk every day not every day, probably a couple times a month, depending on that's how busy he is.
Pretty awesome. Okay.
But that was a moment for me because I had never heard the Grateful Dead. I'd just been a kid that saw all the t-shirts. 2 of the first bands that I saw on like the Warped Tour when I very first went to work for somebody that day to help out.
Sure.
I saw the Bouncing Souls.
Okay.
And they were, I had just gotten through the line and they were on, but they opened that set that day with the song Here We Go, which is just like one of those songs that just pulls you into this just excited, amazing mode and does these incredible things to you. And then right after Bouncing Souls, Dropkick Murphys played and nobody knew who they were, but they had this entourage of people that like traveled to see them. I mean, they were like, it's hard to explain it, but they were almost like the original punk rock, sort of parrot heads.
Sure.
Because everyone's like, Dropkick Murphys, who is this? And I was like, wait a minute, I've heard them. They're awesome. So I went and stood out center of the crowd. And all of a sudden I'm like enveloped by like all of these guys that get out of these like big old long motor homes or whatever. And they've been coming just to see this band, and they're going to see every performance. And they have these enormous, flags with the fist and the clover, and they're waving them all over and running around and getting people all excited.
Dude,
and that was incredible. And to this day, to call those guys, friends is fantastic. They just they do a lot for my soul, and they do so much too for the right causes, for the American worker, for people that are struggling.
Amazing, dude.
Anyway, that was another very long answer, but
very thorough. And like, thank you so much for sharing with us a glimpse into the soundtrack of your life. We really appreciate that.
Excited to support your new project however I can.
Thanks, man.
I think conceptually the idea of people being able to live stream their events, of being able to actually be paid for their work and not hope for crumbs to fall from the table of whatever the asshole's name is who owns, I can't think of his name right now, who owns Spotify. These other people, they're not creative. They're stealing your shit and they're not paying you for it. And there needs to be a change. There needs to be a change. Thank you. That was a very polite way to say that. But yes, support FairVU if you can. Check it out. They're going to be building their platform. It's going to be amazing, and I'm going to try to help them however I can and spread the news. So thank you for the opportunity.
I really appreciate that. My name is Sasha. This is Leland. We will talk to you later. Have a good one.
Take care.
Bye.